Double Blind follows a group of people who do not know each other who are forced to live in the same space for a short amount of time, as they each have individually volunteered to undergo a mysterious medical testing project on a new drug that will one day be hitting the market, and are being paid handsomely for this, as each member of the group is being compensated $30,000 for their time and the use of their bodies to determine if this new drug is market safe or not. And until the experiment has concluded, they are not allowed to leave this communal space or even go outside. The image of the lab rat trapped in a box is what filmmaker Ian Hunt Duffy opens with, a nod to the direction and themes that we will follow along this medical journey, and will be a reoccurring visual motif throughout the piece, which is apt considering where the film goes. And this is very much tied into the dialogue of the piece as well, with one of the group members saying early on, "You don't know what a mouse is capable of," a line that almost seems to insinuate a film that this isn't quite. When I heard that, I assumed that we would have these people getting fucked over by the system and then killing members of the pharmaceutical board by the end of the film out of revenge. And we don't really get that here. Which, it's kind of a shame to have writing early in the picture that teases in the mind of the audience a more exciting version of the movie that they're about to watch. Which is also made all the worse by the ending of the film that doubles down on that idea by teasing a sequel that will actually possibly be just about that. Which is fine. But I think it demonstrates some structural script problems where arguably you could take what this film accomplishes, make that the first and second acts instead, and then have the third act be solely about the revenge. I think that would have made for a more satisfying product, instead of having one slow film that lays the groundwork to tease a more exciting movie that they'll probably never actually make. Although, I hope they do if that's what the filmmakers want to do. Because while I clearly have some issues with this out the gate, Double Blind is an enjoyable medical horror that I think is doing some fun things. And even less than the medical pharmaceutical company, the film is more on a thematic level about the crushing effects of capitalism on those on the bottom. Each of these people are here because they desperately need this money. Our protagonist is even here because she's homeless and needs to get off the streets to have shelter for a time, saying roughly at one point, "If I were a lab mouse, I'd at least have a roof over my head with people to feed me, than out there fending for myself." And this is a persistent, ruminating thought across the film. The volunteers talk about what they're going to be doing with their money once they get out of here. One even says that he's going to move to India to make it last longer, by moving to a poor area to exploit their situation. A joke relying on the economic cycle of abuse that exists within our world, where those with money punch down on those without, and those without punch down on those who have even less. Now, throughout the early sections of the film, we have snippets of the medical administrator, played by Pollyanna McIntosh, who's, great as always, who's arguing with the board who oversees her position, telling them that these drugs are killing these people slowly and that these tests need to stop, which both works and doesn't work for different reasons. I think if these scenes were cut and we had less insight into the McIntosh character, it would create more of a sense of paranoia and unease. It would make the company seem more of an eldritch and unknowable thing. These scenes play for realism, demonstrating that good people can get caught within a bad system, as we watch her horror at the inhumane capability to act without empathy that the company possesses, which in itself does work, but is done in sacrifice of potentially having a much more unnerving film in tone and mood, akin to something like Beyond the Black Rainbow. There's something sinister about companies being this omnipresent, faceless entity that wields power from the shadows. And I think adding needless characters played by actors to represent the company is a disservice to a potential greater mood that a piece like this could develop. Because as much as I love her, the longer the McIntosh character is in the film, the less unknowable the company becomes, and as a result, the piece as a whole is much less scary. And a character like this really should be only brought out a couple of times to ensure that they remain effective. And they have her in the film so much to fulfill the purpose of demonstrating in a shocking way that the company is willing to sacrifice anything to enact its goals, as they kill her basically the moment the things start to turn south. So it ultimately does work for the goals that they want as far as storytelling is concerned. This is all serviceable, but I think there could have been a scarier lens to present this information with, which is a lingering feeling across the film. The drugs that these people have been given are a kind of hyperstimulant. They at first feel very energetic and don't even seem to have the need to sleep at all. But then, as the hours turn into days, they soon learn that the drug has put them in a never-ending state of pure energy. A state that results in a situation where either they're going to stay awake until they die, or they're going to fall asleep and die in their sleep because their body can't handle the sleeping process while the drug is in effect. And we basically have a story about these people trying to stay awake for as long as possible until these drugs are out of their system so that they can survive, while also trying to find a way out of the bunker that they have been trapped within. Where, on top of that, they also begin to suspect that a company representative has hidden themselves amongst their ranks to record data up close and personal of what happens here. And some begin to lash out violently as their sleep-deprived paranoia begins to get the better of them. So kind of Nightmare on Elm Street without the literal monster and instead replaced with the figurative one of the pharmaceutical company that looms over every scene. They are quite literally trapped within the belly of the beast, and the slow grind to the end is the digestion period as we wait for the inevitable. There's no escaping this building, just like there's no escaping the economic realities of the social institutions that exploited them and brought them to this state to begin with. This was the first feature film from Irish filmmaker Ian Hunt Duffy, and for a first work outside of some shorts, I think it's really good. The past few decades have produced a lot of great Irish horror that I feel has not gotten a proper chance on the global stage, with this film being included in there. And I always like getting to experience and talk about Irish horror because I think they really kill it consistently with every one of their horror releases. For other Irish horror recommendations, I had a lot of fun with The Hole in the Ground, You Are Not My Mother, and The Boys from County Hell. And if you check those out, I hope you really like them. All of this ultimately boils down to, though, is a single one-room horror film that could be reproduced as a play. Now, often this is being done for budgetary reasons. You should, often when starting out, write for the money and locations that you can get, and maybe not write for the dream project that you'd like to make for $50 million. There is a practicality that must be considered. And nothing is cheaper than a group of actors sitting in a room together talking for the majority of the runtime, which is what this is. And I really do often like these kinds of projects. Brooklyn 45 from 2 years ago is another fun example of something like that. Or for something more well-known, you could look at something like The Void, although this kind of thing happens all the time. But here in Double Blind, this does suffer a bit from the problem that comes from that kind of limitation, and that one must be able to sustain suspense over a great deal of time to be able to pull off that one-room character drama kind of thing. There either has to be the writing or filmmaking chops to both keep character building going, while simultaneously building energy within the story, which is something that Double Blind in part fails to do in its back half. You compare this to something like Rosemary's Baby and the difference is night and day. And while I know that Rosemary's Baby does not strictly 100% take place in a single location, it almost does, and is enough to make for the comparison here. That doesn't mean that I hate the writing in Double Blind at all. But with a lot of these one-room, limited-budget horror movies, they stumble in the issue of where they will have this very compelling beginning and ending, but the middle hour or so can be a series of good moments and lulls that can stretch a bit too long. But I also don't really mind that as well, because while it isn't technically the best form for this kind of filmmaking, a lot of movies like this are very much comfort movies that I am more likely to put on when my mind is tired. And that is very much what this kind of movie is, where even though a lot of it is being done in a very limited way, there still very much is the kind of audience for that brand of work that exists. It is shot very well and acted well, and there's something to be said for doing middle of the road in a very competent and professional manner. I also do quite appreciate in this the different visual representations of the experience of death. Each character that dies in the film is not presented to us in a traditional way, but instead we watch from the perspective of the inner self viewing their death in a kind of out-of-body experience. And each one is different and tailor-made for the character that it is happening to, which is a nice little surreal kind of detail that works. And overall, I think this is a film that can be really enjoyed, that harkens back to the bizarre 70s and 80s Robin Cook medical thrillers that, don't really exist anymore. And I think it's nice to see for that reason alone.